Distinguished guests, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker for this morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Niv, for that very kind introduction. Members of the faculty, distinguished guests, family members, and friends of the graduates, and of course, you, the 2022 graduating class of the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I am delighted and truly honored to be your commencement speaker. I am also humbled to receive an honorary degree, for which I thank Dr. Jarrell and the Board of Regents of the University System of Maryland. In addition, today is very special to me because I also am here to celebrate the honorary degree that my wife and life partner, Dr. Christine Grady, will receive in recognition of her own independent academic accomplishments. So over the years, I have been privileged to speak to graduate and professional school students such as yourselves at a number of university commencements. Not uncommonly, I have recalled my graduation from medical school many years ago and have drawn analogies between then and now to illustrate that we shared a common experience. Frankly, that would not be appropriate in speaking to your class. The cloud of the COVID-19 pandemic, under which we continue to live, has disrupted your educational experience in profoundly unique and unprecedented ways. Clearly, this historic pandemic will leave an indelible mark on your entire generation. However, the fact that you have successfully navigated each hurdle the pandemic has put in your way just to sit here today is a testimony to your resilience, resolve, and strength of character. And actually, I am in awe of you for this, and you deserve enormous respect for your adaptability and dedication to completing your studies and graduating amidst immense difficulties and uncertainties. And so, while my graduate educational experience was quite different from yours, I would like to briefly reflect on a few issues, including some magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic, that might be worth at least considering. Now, truth be told, when I think back on my own graduation from college and medical school, I cannot remember a single word of what the commencement speaker said. True. And so, years from now, I do not expect you to remember what I say, but in the next few minutes, I hope to kindle in you some thoughts. First, the concept of the perpetual student. It is understandable that on this day you feel that you no longer really are a student. Let me tell you, this is just an illusion. In my own case, it became painfully apparent shortly after I graduated from medical school that my student days had just begun. However, that same principle applies to so many other fields in which we are all perpetual students. Indeed, the mosaic of our knowledge and experience is eternally unfinished. As Will Durant, the late historian, philosopher, and author of the story of civilization famously said, and I quote, "Education is a progressive discovery of our own ignorance." To this day, I still feel a palpable excitement in the continual process of learning, no matter which of the many hats of responsibility that I'm wearing: seeing patients, working in a lab, directing a large biomedical research institute, or advising the President of the United States of America during a raging pandemic. I urge you to embrace such an attitude as you proceed in the wide range of careers that you all will pursue. Which leads me to my next point of discussion. Expect the unexpected. Now, planning and charting one's path in life is something we all do to a greater or lesser degree. However, in my own experience, some of the most impactful events that have touched my life and directions that I have taken have been completely unanticipated and unplanned. You are at a period in your lives where you have the potential to do almost anything. And so please keep an open mind and do not shy away from dreaming impossible dreams and seizing upon unanticipated opportunities. Let me describe briefly an example of such a completely unanticipated challenge and opportunity that profoundly impacted the direction of my career and my entire life. After graduating from medical school and following my years of residency and fellowship training, I began a journey in 1972 as a young clinical investigator at the National Institutes of Health. Over the next 9 years, I progressed to what was considered by many as a very successful, safe, and comfortable career in investigative medicine. My future seemed settled. Then, in June of 1981, 41 years ago next month, I remember quite clearly sitting in my NIH office reading a report from the CDC about a handful of cases of an unusual pneumonia among gay men in Los Angeles. 1 month later, 26 additional cases of gay men from Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York City with not only this unusual pneumonia, but also other rare infections and cancers that were described in a second CDC report. We did not realize it at the time, but we were witnessing the emergence of one of the worst public health scourges in recent memory, the HIV Aids pandemic. I became totally engrossed in this mysterious new disease that did not yet have a name and certainly not an etiologic agent. I am still not sure what drove me to do this, but I decided right there and then to make an abrupt turn in the direction of my career, abandon my successful research pursuits, and investigate the pathogenesis of this mysterious new disease. My mentors, whom I respected, were horrified and insisted that I was making a career-ending mistake and that this disease would amount to nothing. However, the ultimate emergence of the AIDS pandemic and my decision to pivot and devote my effort to this unexpected public health challenge transformed my professional life, if not my entire life, and put me on the path that I am on to this very day. Now, obviously, not every opportunity or challenge that you encounter will influence your careers or your lives or be as dramatic as a mysterious infectious diseases outbreak. However, please believe me that you will confront the same types of unpredictable events that I've experienced, regardless of what directions your careers or your lives take. And so, expect the unexpected and stay heads up for an unanticipated opportunity should it present yourself. Listen to the advice of others who care about you, but at the end of the day, go with your own gut. It can be rewarding, exciting, and potentially career and life-altering. Next, health inequities. Our country's experience with COVID-19 has shown a spotlight on one of the great failings in our society, the lack of health equity. As a physician, I feel that I must highlight this for you today. COVID-19 has exposed long-standing inequities that have undermined the physical, social, economic, and emotional health of racial and ethnic minorities. Many members of minority groups are at increased risk of COVID-19 simply because the jobs they have as essential workers do not allow them to isolate from social activity. More importantly, when people in minority groups are infected with the coronavirus, they have a much greater likelihood of developing a severe consequence due to the elevated rates of underlying conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and chronic lung disease, among others, that lead to an increased risk of hospitalization and death. Now, very few of these conditions are racially determined. Almost all relate to the social determinants of health experienced since birth, including the limited availability of a healthful diet, substandard housing, the lack of access to health care, and tragically, the restrictions and pressures experienced to this very day because of the undeniable racism that persists in our society. Let us promise ourselves that our corporate memory of the tragic reality of the inequities experienced with COVID-19 does not fade after we return to our normal new life. It will take decades-long commitment for society to address these disparities. I strongly urge you to be part of that commitment. Together, we must find the strength, wisdom, ingenuity, and empathy to address these entrenched elements of injustice manifested in so many subtle and sometimes overt ways, and work with all our might to remedy the cultural disease of racism, just as we fight the viral disease of COVID-19. Which brings me to my last point of discussion, another issue magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic. I call it the normalization of untruths. Now, living in Washington, I've experienced firsthand during the COVID-19 pandemic something that has troubled and saddened me: a deepening divisiveness in our nation. Unfortunately, differences of opinion or ideology are sometimes accompanied by egregious distortions of reality. Segments of our society have been increasingly bombarded with falsehoods and lies that often stand largely unchallenged. And sadly, this has led some to accept the insidious normalization of untruths. We see this happen daily, propagated through a range of traditional and social media platforms by a spectrum of people, including, unfortunately, certain elected officials in positions of power. Yet, the outrage and dissent against this alarming trend has been muted and mild. And so, if you remember nothing else from what I say today, I appeal to you, please remember this. It is our collective responsibility not to sink to a tacit acceptance of the distortion of facts and outright lies. Because if we do, we bring danger to ourselves, our families, and our communities. This is how a society deteriorates into a way of life where veracity becomes subservient to propaganda rather than upheld as a guiding principle for creating and sustaining a just social order. James Mill, a Scottish historian and philosopher, wrote, and I quote, "As our opinions are the fathers of our actions, to be indifferent about the evidence of our opinions is to be indifferent about the consequences of our actions." I implore you, apply your abilities to analyze and examine, which you have honed here at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, to discern and challenge weak assertions and to reject pronouncements built on untruths. As our future leaders, we are depending on you for this. In closing, I have been speaking to you over the past few minutes about some serious issues. Putting this serious business aside for a moment, I want to remind you about the joys that life can really bring and what a bright future you have. Allow yourselves to cultivate what brings you joy as much as you do your professional accomplishments. And think about your future as that's stated by the American political theorist John H. Shaw, and I quote, "The future is not some place we are going to, but one we are creating. The paths are not to be found, but made, and the activity of making them changes both the maker and the destination." Congratulations to you, to your families and your loved ones. Good luck, and God bless you.
So many times in the past several years, people have come up to me and said, "Dr. Jarrell, we don't know how to deal with this COVID issue." And I always had one standard comment back to them, and it's a change of a quote that some of you may remember from Dean Witter. And it was, "When Tony Fauci speaks, I listen." I hope you listened too. The other comment in thanking Dr. Fauci is, 30 years from now, when you think about this graduation exercise, I bet you won't remember who the president was or who your dean was, but I'll bet you'll remember who your speaker was. Thank you.